All right, y'all, welcome to the Fitness for 55 Plus podcast brought to you by Stronger Life, the gym for 55 Plus. My name is Dr. Dustin Jones, physical therapist, and we have a very special guest today, Lauren Hunter-Smith with Bluegrass Death Doula. We're going to talk all about what is a death doula, how they could benefit all of us, and just to understand this profession that I feel like we're hearing more and more about and a lot of curiosity about. I think that we can all benefit to learn from and potentially use those services. So first off, thank you for
having me.
For joining. So probably the most asked question that you get, what do you do, right? Like that. So when you say death doula, how would you respond to that?
The word doula is an ancient Greek word, and it just means a woman who provides services. So you're probably familiar with a birth doula. That's kind of our main group of people. And a death doula is very much the same. We are people who aid and support people through death and dying. And that, of course, means a whole span of things, and it can be many different things. For me, I am a death doula. I am a celebrant. I'm a certified sound therapist. I am an aromatherapist. So it can be a lot of different things.
Okay. So when do people typically seek your services, and then when should they seek your services?
Ideally, we're getting you long before you need me. We have time to think about it. We can kind of process what we want to do at the end of life. We can make different choices. It's much easier when it's not at need.
Yeah.
When we get to at need, there are things we've got to do. And depending on what type of diagnosis we work with, like I might show up to your house and I might be there for 12 hours because we've got to get things done. And there is a point where, like, if a person's already entered active dying, there's not a lot I can do. I can come, I can support the family, I can create what we call a death nest or like a comfortable environment. But at that point, there's just not much to be done.
Yeah.
I do offer funeral support, so that's somewhere where I can kind of tag in for the family, kind of help them decide, look at all the different options they have. When you go to a funeral home, they're not going to say, these are all the different things you can do.
Yeah.
They have a product that they're going to sell to you, which is fine. That's how capitalism works. But if you really want to find something that's authentic and really feels true to yourself and really attest to who you were, it's a good idea to go ahead and start thinking about these things.
Yeah. So what is the typical age you'd say on average for folks that you're working with? That's a tough question.
A lot of my people are the children of aging people. So they're 40, 50 years old. They want to have a conversation about death with their parents, and they're not comfortable doing it. So that's kind of where I'm just sort of a facilitator.
Got it.
And my job is to aid them in doing those questions. And we do what's called an advanced care directive, which, that's always where we start. It's the most important thing. If you don't have one, go do one. They're free. There's a billion on the internet. If you don't like one, there are a million more.
Can you explain what that is for folks?
Yeah. So an advanced care directive is the decisions you want made for you if you're not able to make decisions for yourself. And what I notice is people seem to kind of think that they're going to have this like bubble of time to kind of think about it. But when we're actually in active dying, those decisions come very, very, very quickly. So if you don't know how you feel or you don't know what you want to do, it can aid or it can delay you in getting treatment or, like comfort medications. Because there's a process, an administrative side to all of that. So once you know what you want to do for those decisions, it really, really helps during those end-of-life scenarios.
Yeah. I've experienced that from the physical therapist side and home health and hospice, and my wife's an ER physician, and some of the most challenging scenarios that she'll face is when those decisions have not been made and having to scramble to reach a family member if someone's not able to make a decision. It's a really challenging scenario. So advanced care directives are really big deal.
It's always where we start. If you're 18, you need one. Just do it.
That's awesome. So advanced care directives, what's kind of next in your kind of usual triage list of things to address?
So we start with our advanced care directives, and then we move into what I call funeral planning, which it's not like you're setting up a formal funeral plan. It's just trying to get an idea of what you want to do. So we're going to talk about all the different forms of disposition, all the different types of funerals. There are types of funerals. I don't know if people even realize that.
What are some examples of different?
So we can do a living funeral, which is where we know a person is entering kind of the end of their mortality, and we want to acknowledge that. They're wonderful if you have that opportunity. Yes, they're very sad at the beginning, but by the end, it's really, really awesome when people can have that time to do it.
Yeah.
But that, is usually exclusive to people who are either of significant age or have a long diagnosis, so they have the time to do it.
Right.
And then we can do something that's a little bit more casual. You don't have to go to a funeral home. You don't have to have a viewing. You don't have to do any of those things. You can literally do whatever you want.
Yeah.
For my dad, we had a picnic at the park, and it was really nice. It felt more like him. I think when you go to a funeral that feels like your person, that's a much more healing experience than when you're in this sort of canned beige environment that doesn't reflect who your person was.
Right.
And then we talk about disposition, and that's something, again, a funeral home's not going to lay this all out for you, but you can choose so many different things. There's body donation, you can do cremation, you can do natural burial, conventional burial, human composting. There are all these things that are available that if you don't talk about them ahead of time, they're not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's usually where we go from there. Then once we kind of have the death plan together, we start working on what's called a legacy project. And that's where you're kind of creating something for people to remember you by. And it's cool. It can be anything. It might be, a pillow you've embroidered. It might be, I had a professor do a last lecture, and it was just him talking about his life and what he got out of, all these different experiences. I had a quilter who did a huge quilt show. You can do whatever you want. Another one was a writer, and she had like a special section in the library when she died. She set that all up so all of her books would be there. But it's really, really healing for the people around you. And it's something that I find people, when they're making these things or putting these things together, it helps them reflect through their life as well. And that's a really healing experience.
Yeah.
From there, we do comfort care. So comfort care is where I come in and I might do sound therapy, I might do a guided meditation, Reiki, hand massage, that type of thing. But what I'm also doing is showing your family how to interact with a dying person. Because what I find happens is, generationally speaking, we're only around a dying person every 20 years or so. So it's not something anybody gets good at, you know? So what happens is people tend to kind of like shy away, fold their arms, they don't want to interact. It almost is like taboo to interact with that person. So when you have somebody like a death doula kind of facilitating, like, okay, we're going to do a hand massage and this is how you do that. Or your dad wanted this music, let's go get that and play that. That really allows the family to have a more active role in that, in the dying process. And that it's really healing. It's really important for people to be able to do that. And I think as death has gotten more medical, we've kind of steered away from that. And I do believe there's a happy medium there.
Do you see trends in terms of like seeking your services, and I view it as like acceptance of the inevitable for us all? Are there trends, kind of a swinging shift from how we've kind of hyper-medicalized death and really removed it from most of our sight and daily lives
It's
to
not
kind
part
of being exposed to it, like, because I get exposed to that, but I don't know if it's like the crowds that I'm in or the people I hang around or the media I consume. Like from like a national standpoint, is there kind of a shift away from like the hyper medicalization of death? Is that what we're seeing? Or
I think so. I think there are a lot of people who have had bad death experiences at this point, and it might be, you didn't understand what was happening at the hospital, or when you went to the funeral director, you were so overwhelmed you couldn't really make decisions that felt correct for you. Things like that happen. But what I'm seeing is people are noticing that when they become more involved as a family, when people are talking about things ahead of time, it very much changes what your death experience is like. Not just for the dying, but for the family as well. And, it's not a big conversation. Like a lot of the time I'll come in to facilitate and, we might sit around and talk for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. but in that little amount of time, it makes a drastic difference in people's end-of-life care. So it's worth doing.
Yeah, yeah. I've experienced that I've never formally worked with a death doula, but our family's had several losses over the past 5 years, and it's been interesting to go through that experience as a family member when a lot of those conversations were had, and then when they weren't. And we really, in about a 14 month period, we experienced kind of both ends of the spectrum. Yeah. And it was, they're both tough for sure, but one was definitely tougher than the other. And the individual that kind of crossed their T's and dotted their I's and made a lot of decisions and kind of went out on their own terms, it was a noticeably different experience from the family standpoint. Better, I don't know if that's a good word for it, but I guess it definitely, it was a sense of closure, So that was really interesting to experience. That got me more curious.
Right.
From your standpoint, so, we have you get through, talk about disposition, you make so many decisions. Are you involved much in the assets and, all right, here are the password, all these little things that become big things, once the death happens, are you involved in that process as well? Or
yeah, depending on what kind of planning I'm doing, what kind of client it is. If I have a full service client, we do all of that. So we do all of your passwords. We know where your life insurance papers are. And really what I end up doing is making a binder. And it's literally, as you turn the pages, day 1, this is what we're going to do. Day 2, this is what we're going to do. And that, it does make it easier. There's also just so much administrative stuff that comes with death that I don't think people realize.
Yeah.
And it's, it's government ease. It's a difficult language. If you're already grieving, you're not in a super sharp mental place, and then you're handed all these papers to close out someone's life, that's really overwhelming.
Yeah.
So just getting to a spot where, that's going to happen, when that's going to happen, what to do when it's going to happen. Like you said, I won't say it makes it easier, but it certainly takes some pressure off of people.
Yeah, that was really eye-opening to me, experiencing that for the first time. Is the amount, if the decisions have not been made and the conversations have been had, the amount of decisions that you have to make in such a relatively short period of time, and it's so easy to let that take the space of grieving or just reflecting on that person, and you stay busy. Right. And then everything happens, a funeral happens, and then the people leave, and then it's oh crap,
now what do I do?
Yeah. So it's a very challenging scenario, but man, the services that you're providing to so many people in that circle, that person touches, that's got to be super fulfilling.
Oh yeah, it makes such a big difference. And for me, what I do isn't really a big deal. I'm just sort of a person who's it's okay to have these conversations. Yeah. I'm just a facilitator. But it makes a huge difference in people's lives, and that's worth doing.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. So we had some questions from the Stronger Life community. Kristen, she shared a couple. We've touched on some of these. One that she asked was about hospice. So how do you work with someone that maybe, in hospice care? How does that interaction typically work?
So hospice provides resources. So they're going to be providing your medication. They're going to be providing any sort of beds, linens, those type of things that you might need. They're going to provide those. They're not going to come and sit down with you and go through every single decision you can make during death. That's sort of where I come in. Hospice has a corporate structure. There are things that they have to abide by. I don't have to abide by.
Yeah.
So I can say all the nitty-gritty things. I can really fill in a space that they're not able to fill. Not because they don't want to fill it, but because that's not their lane. We work together. We are friends. So we don't cross over very much, but we're definitely on the same path.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was also a question about price, which I wouldn't mention price
Doesn't bother me.
on here. Well, because someone could listen to it 3 years from
That's
now.
true.
Like, oh, I thought you said. But what I'm more curious about is, are there options for people to use, like if they have HSA or FSA funds or any, like Medicare Advantage plans or any, are they able to use any of those types of services to pay for yours, or how does that
Not
work?
currently. We're seeing that shift in Europe.
Okay.
Their doulas are being covered in European countries now. I would love to say I think it'll be soon here.
Yeah.
I don't know. In terms of pricing, something I find really off-putting about the death industry is it's evasive in terms of pricing. Like, you're not going to go to a funeral home's website and see them list what things cost. So I do that. I make sure you know exactly what I cost. If you can't cover the cost, I do public classes to kind of disperse that. But I also have a slush fund. So if a family comes to me and they need help and they can't cover it, I can cover it most of the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for listeners, watchers, viewers, whatever, however you're consuming this, we'll put bluegrassdeathdoula.com, her URL, in the show notes. So you'll be able to find all that information there. And then also another question that was interesting. What if someone dies alone? Is a question Kristen said. And I found that interesting because in healthcare, like I've definitely experienced that in home health, where folks did not have a support system. Are you working with many folks that don't have a support system that may?
Yeah, I do have some solo agers, and
Yeah.
they're kind of in a different tier for me because they're solo agers.
Yeah.
And really, when we look at a death doula situation, we're looking at the resources you have. So, like, how much money do you have, or what's accessible to you, the community you have. So, what people are around you, and then family.
Okay.
And we usually say if you have 2 of those things, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Solo agers don't always have to, but a lot of the times I think people do find like they have a much bigger community than they realize.
Yeah.
But my role for a solo ager is basically to make sure that you are taken care of till your last moment.
That's beautiful.
I think it gives people a lot of comfort. But I also want to say that there are people who want to die alone.
Yeah.
There are people who want that. Women specifically, like, we don't die in front of our children. That does not happen. So, people get this thing, and it's like, give people a minute to themselves. Even when they're dying, just every once in a while, step out of the room, let them have some time to themselves. They're on a big journey too, you know? And I think sometimes you just need to be alone to process some of that.
Yeah.
Or to fit, like, I'm an only child, so I can kind of see myself being like, I need a minute.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's amazing. I mean, you're doing amazing work, and especially from my angle, here with this gym, there's a lot of goals that we have with the Stronger Life community. One of them is to really challenge a lot of narratives around aging and stereotypes that people have with a certain birth date. And I think along with that is death, and how we view it and accept it, and just think about and reflect on it before it actually
when you got a little
happens.
time to do it.
Yeah, and so when I came across your work, it's like, man, that's just a beautiful service, that is just a very helpful service for so many folks. So kudos to you for doing this. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you really want folks to know about Bluegrass Death Doula?
Well, again, everything I do, you can do yourself. You do not need to pay me unless you want to. So I make it a little bit easier, but all these things are accessible. All these things are doable. You can do this all yourself. Yeah. In terms of being a death doula, there's no governing board. Like, if you want to be a death doula, you just start calling yourself a death doula. That's fine. No one's going to yell at you for it. But really taking any amount of time to do preparation makes a huge difference. And honestly, if you are 18 or have people in your life who are young, they need to do an advanced care directive. Not just because you want to know what their decisions are, but because at that point you're legally responsible for the people around you. And these are big choices. And if you're not familiar with what that looks like, that can be incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah.
I also want to say that it's important to know who your proxy is. So if you don't get along with your brother, but that's your only living family member, that's who's going to be making your end-of-life choices unless you have legal paperwork in place.
Yeah.
So it's important to realize who that person is and what capability they have.
Yeah.
Don't put your best friend who can't make really emotional decisions in charge of your end-of-life care. That's not fair. You know, choose people, make sure they know. That's not a surprise thing.
Yeah.
Make sure they know you're your proxy. Make sure they know what you want. That's really the very most important thing in all of this.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great.
And I say it because I've seen it.
Right. I know that's the thing is like there's a reason that you're saying this. Oh, I love it. All right, so I think that's some marching orders for me. I know, and hopefully, you know, for listeners and viewers, yeah, I think we all have. A lot of us probably have a lot of work to do.
But don't be afraid of it. It won't kill you, I promise.
Yeah.
I feel like people sense this taboo that, like, once you talk about it, it's going to happen. And I've never seen that happen. So,
Yeah.
like, it's safe to do it. There's a lot of different resources. 5 Wishes is my personal favorite in terms of advanced care directives. It's written by the American Board Association and the American Hospice Nurse Association.
Okay, 5 Wishes. We'll put that link in the show notes as well.
Super thorough. If you don't like it, you can do it. There's a million. There are literally millions of these things. So just find one you like. Make sure your proxy knows where it is, and you're on your way.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Lauren Hunter-Smith with Bluegrass Death Doula, thank you for taking the time, speaking to folks. If you all have questions for Lauren, her website is going to be in the show notes, so go there. Tons of information, pricing as well. Lots of really good content on there as well. So go ahead, go to that website, hit her up, and check. We'll have that 5 Wishes document in the show notes as well. So thank you for doing what you're doing and spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.